We want to bring education to our youth bigger and better because we want them to be more civilized in their ways and in their actions and within the community. Education will do that.
This is the second chapter of Blacks in the City of Rahway from 1930 to the present. This phase of history will showcase the educational process utilized by the city's public education system. This presentation is by no means an isolated update on the problems of the educational system in the City of Rahway, but a microcosm of the state and country. We hope that this small piece of history will enlighten you to the gains made by African Americans living in the City of Rahway and not the minefields of racism.
There's an adage that was developed in the 1980s, and I think it was a phrase that was coined by a black superintendent in Plainfield at the time. And he said that it's cool to be smart.
Before I start, though, I would just like to say how honored I am to be here with you all today in this publication or broadcast for Black history within the educational system here in Rahway. I just want to start off by saying this: education is very prime and important. It was Minister Farrakhan who started off, who said, education is the torchlight for civilization, and wherever you find savages, you'll find a lack of education. So I'm happy to be a part of this. We want to bring education to our youth bigger and better because we want them to be more civilized in their ways and in their actions and within the community. Education will do that.
This is the second chapter of Blacks in the City of Rahway from 1930 to the present. This phase of history will showcase the educational process utilized by the city's public education system. This presentation is by no means an isolated update on the problems of the educational system in the City of Rahway, but a microcosm of the state and country. We hope that this small piece of history will enlighten you to the gains made by African Americans living in the City of Rahway and not the minefields of racism, segregation, and separation. Did racism exist?
While you were at Roosevelt School, did you witness any discrimination or prejudice within the system?
I would say very little that was overt and very conspicuous. You may question some of the decisions that were made, and I'm referring here to the system of tracking, which at that time was a hot button topic, tracking of students based upon ability.
Now, I remember tracking first at Roosevelt School, and then I remember the middle school getting you ready for the high school, and either you're going to be prepared for college prep, general education, or business.
Yeah, there's something similar to that. Like, it's like with the classes, like they have like general, then they have college prep, and then they have honors. The people who are in honors and AP. So the people who are in honors and AP, they're like, oh, okay, these are the smart kids. And then CP, oh, they're good. And then it's like general, it's like, oh, well, you know, not as good as college prep. So like, I think sometimes like they just expect certain things of you, because I know there's some kids in honors who are like it's like, what are you doing here? Like, you really don't know what you're doing.
Tracking, if you look at it in its purest stage, tracking has its merits. But when humans have to be responsible for the implementation of a tracking policy, then it's susceptible to perhaps having some discrimination or some prejudicial attitudes come into the picture. By this I mean, it was very interesting that most of the students that were in the lower tracks happened to be students who were minority, and that was unfortunate. And it was a feeling among some staff that there were some students who perhaps deserved to be in a lower track, and for some reason they were not placed in a lower track, and coincidentally they were not black students.
My concern would be if you look in the classroom and if you see more African American students than any other students, then my thing is, what is the problem?
We had a group that was called the freight trains. We had a group that was called the local trains. And we had the group that was called the express trains.
There was tracking system, track 1, track 2, and they tried to push most of the minorities into the general courses.
They seemed like they was trying to put all the black children in like remedial classes like general math as opposed to taking like algebra.
Say when I got up to algebra, algebra class, algebra 1 and 2, where was myself and Jim Jones were the ones in the classroom.
My classrooms were always diverse. There was always a combination of black students and white students within the same class. And I remember when I got to 8th grade, all of a sudden, they were virtually all gone. It was myself and one other student. And from that point on, the number of students of color in my classes were very, very small. And these were the same people I had gone all the way through elementary and junior high school with, and I couldn't understand what had happened. Now I know why.
They were preparing you so when you got to high school, you didn't meet the requirements for the college prep courses. So if you took like general math, you know, when you got to high school, you needed at least to have algebra before you even got there. So that even put you further back.
Well, I was aware of it, but I was never a part of it.
Okay.
My education was really more in actually the advanced courses, and I was taking calculus and that kind of thing in my senior year, so that I was one of the lucky ones that did not get involved in that.
I was fortunate enough by the time I went to junior high school, you know, I knew where I was going to college, but I could easily see African-American child growing up through the system and their senior year realizing that they weren't prepared for it, that they were steered more into the easier math classes, the easier science classes, the easier English classes. When you walk into high school and you give everybody the opportunity saying, look, if you're trying to go to college, you really should take this class.
I never had that. I never knew my guidance counselor until I became a senior, and it was evident that I had become an all-state football player in Rahway, and Earl Hoagland made it so that I would take a test to get the necessary qualifications to go to college.
And there were only 6 blacks in my school, in my class, and only 2 of us had applied. We never did see an advisor, you know, to advise us what was available or anything like that.
But there was a black guidance counselor at the high school who was not my guidance counselor, who had suggested that I apply. And I applied, and I got accepted with a scholarship. But I often think about how my life would have been different if I had listened to my own guidance counselor instead of the other guidance counselor, who happened to be an African-American female, who provided some appropriate guidance.
Ms. Leola Hayes found a way to get black students into colleges and universities throughout the country and introduced a lot of them to historically black colleges and universities, an avenue white guidance counselors were not familiar with at the time.